Hello and welcome to our sixth weekly webinar series dealing with the topic CRE Industry Expert Opinion, Coronet Weekly's webinar series, COVID-19 Changing Office Use and Design. My name is Rodney McDonald, and in addition to my day job as Principal and President at Falkbuilt Toronto Branch, I am co-chair of the Programming Committee for Coronet Global Canadian Chapter. On behalf of Coronet Canada, we are very pleased to bring you today's event. A reminder that our next weekly webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, June 9th at 2 o'clock and will feature Rebecca Horton, Workplace Wellbeing Advisor at Herman Miller. Please visit our website for more information or watch your inbox. Registration for members is free, $10, but all proceeds will be donated to Food Banks Canada. Before I turn things over to our speaker today, I wanted to mention that if you have any questions, you can write them in the question box. They will be moderated for the end of the webinar. I would now like to introduce you to today's speaker. Kane Willmott is the co-founder and CEO of IQ Office Suites, a luxury co-working company with locations in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Ottawa, and Montreal. Kane has 20 years of sales and entrepreneurial experience, assisting in the startup of multiple real estate brokerages, as well as a public company listed on the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange. He is passionate about creating entrepreneurial environments where top performers can do their best work. He takes great pride in building strong teams, reinforced with a culture of service excellence. In addition to running IQ Office Suites, Kane oversees the operation of a real estate brokerage, Spire Commercial Realty, as well as a real estate investment company, Spire Capital Investments. He served as president of the Global Workspace Association and has done a number of speaking engagements promoting the use and implementation of co-working strategies for entrepreneurs, organizations, and owners of commercial real estate. I'd like to welcome Kane Willmott. Kane?
Thanks, Rodney. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for being here. It's all yours.
Pleasure. All right, fantastic. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about, and Rodney and I discussed a couple of weeks back, what our plan was in terms of keeping our spaces safe in the climate of COVID and where we are now and today. And a number of weeks ago, well, now we're talking almost 10 weeks ago, in the middle of May, we had heard of this coming to Canada, and I was actually in Calgary at the time when we started to hear about the effects of COVID. We took action quickly before government guidance to shut down, because we believed that that was the right thing to do in terms of keeping our staff and our members safe. And we went into communication mode right away, and we didn't have all the answers by any means. But what we did do is we reached out to each one of our staff and each one of our members and communicated on a daily basis, explaining as much as we knew. And I can say that during the first month, it was changing every single day, and there was a real challenge in terms of getting consistent information and really understanding what were the best things to do. What we did early on is we partnered up with and we hired a consultant called Get Ready Global. And Get Ready Global is a company that specializes in emergency response and virus containment. And that company came in and looked at our specific situation. And what we found was fairly early on was that every single company, certainly, and even within our company, every single location has its unique aspects to the spaces that can present challenges. And so what we did is we partnered with this company and we put together what we call the Workspace Acclimation Plan. And the idea was that we knew we were going to be returning to the office, and this is going back to early days, early April. We knew we were going to be returning back to the office at some point, but we didn't know what it would look like. And we knew that we would have to do everything we could to create safe spaces for our staff and our members. And we knew it's something we couldn't do on our own. So there was a lot of publications in terms of best practices, and the real estate brokerages and some of the design firms put out some excellent packages to talk about, like, what are the best practices and what are the key elements in making spaces safe. And what we found is that it's still, when you look at those, it was great to understand, yes, these are some of the components, but there's also complexity in looking at how do you take those components and put them together. And what I found was, or what we found when we went through this education process, is effectively that you cannot take risk to zero. But what you can do is you can look at these different elements of safety, and we call it the 5 safe workspace elements, and it's within our workspace acclimation plan. And when you layer them on top of each other, they have a compounding effect in terms of their ability to reduce risk. So if you look at like one item as an example, like screening, and you said, well, how effective is screening? Well, screening is effective if you have symptoms, and screening is effective if you have you've traveled and you might be in that high risk category, because it can identify that. But of course, as we all know, you could be asymptomatic and still be in a position where you could spread. So in that sort of scenario, the screening itself would not catch that one person getting through. But when you look at screening and then you layer that on top of the different elements that we put in place in these workspace elements, what you find is that your risk really starts to decrease, because first you got to get through the screening process, and then you have to look at what all of your services are and where are the contact points, right? And then you start to work through that acclimation plan, and you start to realize that as you do this, you're exponentially reducing your risk within your space. And our overarching goal is to always make sure that we're providing extremely safe workspaces throughout our locations. So what we did is we undertook every single location, looking at every single location, an audit. So with Get Ready, every single location, looking at specific offices, looking at specific amenity spaces, and then looking at all of the operations around the co-working operations. And then what do we need to do to augment that in order to create these safe workspaces? And I guess, I apologize, I should back up a little bit to say kind of who we are and where we came from. Rodney described a little bit in the intro, but just to give you an overview of ourselves at IQ, we started a co-working firm in 2012. We started with one location at 140 Yonge Street, 11,000 square feet, small location. And then since then, we've grown. We now have 4 locations open in Toronto. We have 2 locations open in Vancouver, 1 location open in Ottawa, and then a location under construction in both Calgary and Montreal. So we're now the largest Canadian-owned co-working operation in Canada. So I would say that to back up a little bit, we had the great benefit of having resources as an organization going into this. So we were doing some of the math on what it took in terms of the undertaking to create these safe spaces, and we're in the over 1,500 plus hours in order to design, audit, redesign, and implement this process that we're doing right now. So it's an absolutely huge undertaking. And every aspect of our operations, every aspect of our spaces had to be looked at and then rethought. So one of the things that we thought from a co-working perspective that we'd see as a large impact was density. And we expected that because with co-working spaces, they tend to, our design is private offices. We do have dedicated desks and open space within our portfolio, but it's something that we haven't built in any of our new locations. And it's a very small component of what we offer. The larger component of what we offer at IQ is enterprise quality private offices. And so looking at that sort of structure, we have to think about, well, how do we create safe spaces throughout this entire portfolio? So looking back at that density question that I was just posing, that was we figured that would be a large challenge. Luckily for us, because of that enterprise offering that we've always had, we haven't really looked at over densifying our spaces and maximizing and putting as many desks as we possibly could into our spaces. So we really found that for us the impact wasn't tremendous, because we'd already created spaces that didn't have this what you call over densification. So we went through. From an office perspective, what we had to do was reconfigure desks. In some instances, we had to take desks out of space. we had to reconfigure the desks into centric circles. So we would look at how you could move up throughout this space while maintaining that social distancing of 6 feet. And then in instances where we weren't able to maintain the distance of 6 feet, as an example, when desks were sitting towards each other, we used a plexiglass solution. And that plexiglass solution protects each, people that are facing each other that aren't keeping that 6 feet of distance between them. Then from there, we'd look at the amenity spaces. And then with the amenity spaces, we'd look at, well, how do we mobilize and how do we move around that amenity space? And we'd look at what are our options in terms of making sure that we're not, that we can move about that space without becoming into that 6 foot proximity. So in that, we look at doing rotations throughout our space. We try to make them as efficient as possible. Understanding one of the things that we have to consider as a co-working space is that we have to sell our space every day. So we have to, first of all, make sure that is extremely safe, but we also have to make sure too that we provide a frictionless experience as much as possible in the new normal. So when we're looking at, well, how are we moving about the space, we're really thinking about, well, what are the efficiency factors? Like, how can we move efficiently within the space? And so that took a lot of thought and a lot of time and design. And then in addition to that, looking at our amenities, how many people would we have sitting in certain areas? Like, we'd have booths and we'd have one person sitting at it as opposed to 4. We've reconfigured furniture. But one of the things that I in looking at what a number of operators have done, and that I think is something to consider, and we had to consider it fairly early on, was, do we want to leave everything the way it is and then simply say, well, best practices are sit in that seat, don't sit in that seat? And our commitment to safety put us on the side of, we really need to take that move and remove the desk where there's a problem. We really need to take that move and put the plexiglass where there could be that sort of situation, because ultimately we feel that in order to create the safe workspaces for everyone, we need to ensure that not only our members who place a high priority on the safety are acting in a certain way, but we need to ensure everybody is within the space. We need to create an environment where it doesn't really suggest or promote abuse, where you'd have 16 desks in a situation where they're all there with chairs. People wouldn't be social distancing if they're sitting in every one, and it becomes an honor system. So that was an important move early on in terms of what we decided to do at IQ offices. And then from there, looking at back at the amenity spaces, we would look at doing the social distancing, as I mentioned, and then also the offerings. So we used to have a fresh food, trail mix snack bar throughout all of our spaces. And now we have prepackaged snacks. So we had to think about, well, that offering, like, how do we still create this amazing offering for our members, but then make sure that it's safe. It's a safe offering. So in that, we had to do prepackaged snacks. Happy hours, we're looking at, we have happy hours on a cart. We take them down to the individual offices so we don't have large gatherings. So we have to really think about every single aspect of our operations. And what's interesting is that there's just as much of a consideration from the process perspective as there was from the architect's perspective in terms of what we needed to actually do physically to the space. So then when you look at the operation side, we had to look at, well, what do we need to do to clean these spaces? How often do they need to be cleaned? And looking at Get Ready and speaking to them about best practices, we need to do a cleaning rotation every 2 hours on our space. So first, we have to make sure we do a 2-hour rotation. But then on top of that too, one of the key elements of the workspace acclimation plan and one of its key purposes is to educate and communicate and really talk about the things that we're doing. And our overarching goal is, as I say, to keep safe, but also to create confidence in coming back to the workspace. I think there's all kinds of challenges working from home. And I think that there's been a tremendous opportunity now where companies have had people working from home and they've realized that they can trust them working from home. And there's this opportunity to create flexibility for people, for staff, which I think is fantastic. But I also believe that there is a tremendous value in face-to-face, in community, in connecting with people, and being in proximity to people. But you need to be able to feel safe in that environment. So with that, we need to be able to create confidence. And I believe that with us being in the business of providing service workspace, it's on us to create that standard, to really provide those safe workspaces, to provide that confidence within our spaces. and then to bring people back to the office so that they can collaborate, they can have that sense of community. Because I think it's also very important for corporate culture that people be in that same space as well. So so in looking at that, we rolled out this plan. So it's a workspace acclimation plan. As of last week, we put this workspace acclimation plan on our website. So if you're interested in downloading the plans, 28-page plan, it is on our website. Simply go to the top banner that says COVID-19. Constance has it here on the screen. I wasn't able to get everything working on the screen, but Constance, yeah, if you could flip that around for me, that would be awesome. But this is available to anybody who's interested in looking at it. And seeing what we're doing. So this is the plan that we shared with every single one of our members, and obviously every single one of our staff worked, intensively in creating this workspace acclimation plan. But we went to every single member and we took them through the workspace acclimation plan. So what we're gonna see in the coming weeks is that we're going to be putting out some more information on, well, how do we travel, how do we get to work, and what are some of the hybrid work styles and some of the best practices and so forth from that perspective as well. This document was really about how do you reintroduce your members, your staff back to the workplace? How do you instill that confidence, and how do you really communicate what it is that you're doing as an organization to ensure their safety? So we put out this workspace acclimation plan. After we spoke with all of our members about it, we talked about it internally at IQ, and we felt that it was extremely important that not only do we share this with our membership, but we should share this with anybody who's interested in providing safe workspace. We believe everybody deserves to have safe workspace, and if we can be of any assistance in helping groups create safe workspaces, we want to do that. And so this is really, instead of just looking at some of the elements of it, this really takes it down to the ground and looks at what does it take to not only in theory talk about the different elements of what to do, but actually implementing them and having them working and putting them in motion. So, and we're getting real-time feedback right now. We opened up Vancouver as of Monday, and we have been accepting members at that location because of the legislation in BC. We've opened up earlier at that location than we have in other provinces. So that's given us an opportunity to get a glimpse into like how everything's working. And of course, through this whole thing, we're going to be shifting and adjusting and communicating, and we're going to be tweaking, and we're going to be looking at what does it take, right? But what we have found so far in Vancouver is that it was very well received. We spoke again with every single one of our members. We felt that that communication plan was a key element to the success of reintroducing back into the workspace, talking to people individually and understanding what is it that are their concerns. We sent out a survey to our members prior to them coming on site, and to really understand like what are those elements, what would it take to create a safe workspace, what is your experience working from home, what do you miss from being in the office, those sort of things, so we could really get to know what it is that's on the mind of our members and what it is that we need to service. So from the results of that survey, from the one-on-one conversations that we've had, and then the communication of this plan, I feel like we've been put in a unique position of being able to really understand from a user's perspective of the product, which is serviced office space, or office space for that matter, what is in their minds and what is it that they're putting a priority on. And what we did find through that survey was that many people saw this like there being an opportunity to work from home, and they like the idea of working from home, but they also miss the office. One of our questions was like, how many days would you want to work at home? And it was, you know what, I'm gonna have to look back at the survey, but there was a large component of that survey that said that they would want 1 or 2 days at home, not 5 days a week. In fact, most of them said they would not want to work from home 5 days a week, and I think that's what we're going to see. I think you're going to see that that individuals will want to have some flexibility to work from home from a lifestyle perspective, from a productivity perspective, but there's also great value, obviously, in being in the office, and we saw that they were ready in Vancouver. Many of them were ready to come back to the office. They wanted to be in the office, not necessarily 9 to 5, 5 days a week, but they wanted to come back to the office. They wanted to get that back into their routine, and they wanted to see their coworkers. So, so Constance, if you want, we can just do a quick run through the workspace acclimation plan, and we can talk about some of the things that are in this plan. So I talked about the 5 safe workspace essentials, which are part of the workspace acclimation plan. In this, as I mentioned earlier about the screening, the stacking, when you look at screening and then sanitation and then social distancing and then adaptation in terms of offerings and resources, and then and communicating the entire plan, you really decrease the risk associated with being in the workspace. So we had to pick apart every single one of these elements and look at what it is that we need to do to implement these, and then think about not only like from a screening perspective, just to use a couple of small examples. We screen everyone as they're going through our spaces. Constance, if you can just go down, I think I can show you. Yeah, perfect. Just one more. That's Get Ready. That's the company that we retained. And then so screening. So this is that picture right that you see right there. That's 550 Robson in Vancouver. So as you can see, that location, we had we had to go through, well, how do we make sure that that we have signage in the space, that we're communicating properly when people walk into the space. We always have someone at our reception desk at all of our locations. It's always been that way. We've always had a high staff to member ratio at our locations. So, but that's important, the screening aspect. And one of the things that we were doing when we were screening people is we're giving them a wristband. So if you go into an IQ in Vancouver today, you will see that everyone within that space has a wristband, and that wristband signifies that they have been screened. It means that they've answered no to all of the questions that we have in our standard questionnaire when people come into the space, and it also means that they've had temperature taken. So, and that's a camera. So essentially, a camera takes the heat signature when someone walks into the space. So what it means is, and what it means is that when you're in the space, you know that everyone in that space has been screened. That there's a certain level of safety. And again, it's very visual, and I think it's very important that as you implement these measures in order to instill confidence, there needs to be that constant reminder of the commitment that you're making in order to keep that space safe. So if you look at the screening process, obviously this is a very visual process, but we thought the wristbands were also another way of us showing like that everyone has been screened throughout the space. We have to think about when they come in, how long does that take? What is it intrusive in any way? Is, what kind of, the questions that we're going to ask, like what time are people coming in during the day? Communicating with all of our members to say, if everybody's going to be coming in at 8:30 in the morning, then maybe you should look at shifting when you're arriving at the office. So we need to communicate that as well. We want to make sure that when people come to the office, we make it as seamless an experience as possible while still making sure that they're safe. So there's all those elements. So you think it's just like, okay, well, just screening. Well, sure, it's screening, but how do you know that everybody's been screened in space? How do you create the process and design the process in a way that you don't have a lineup of 40 people standing at the front door waiting 20 minutes to get into their office, so that they're saying, well, I'm not going to go back to the office again. So like that's just one small example of looking at every single element, walking the customer path through that process, and then thinking about like what is it that creates a great experience for them. So this that you see here, this just talks about some visuals going through, like if you fail, this, you would leave the space. We have a station that you go to if you were to fail, and it's reported. There's an app that is available through Get Ready that we use in order to report. So if there was someone that failed that test, we would be able to report it immediately. We can report it to the local municipality that there was a case, contact tracing, all the things that we need to do from a workspace safety perspective. In addition to that, just higher-arching in terms of this plan, the plan was put together in guidance with the CDC, the WHO, and is also in compliance with the Ministry of Labor. And I think that that's something that's really important as well. And I think that for many employers, there is an apprehension and some anxiety around how do I create a safe workspace for my staff, and how do I instill confidence in that space. And I can understand for groups that are in technology, as an example, it's very easy to just say, well, we're just going to have everybody work from home, maybe forever, or maybe for an extended period of time. It does solve one of the challenges, which is creating a safe workspace and create a safe work environment and decreasing risk for their staff. I do think that, not to get too philosophical on it, but I think that there are other measures that should be taken into account. I mean, if you're going to say to all your staff that you're going to work from home forever, I mean, when they took that job, did they want to work from home forever? Like, I don't like, so and there's some well-documented studies that show that there's some challenges with working from home. So I think that just like the abstinence, I'm not sure that is necessarily a solution. And I think at IQ, what we have is we have the opportunity for many of these companies to kind of fill that gap, where it's like they don't want to focus on what it's going to take to create a safe workspace, because we understand what it takes to do so, and we understand that it's very customized and it's very labor intensive. So we believe that there's going to be an opportunity for IQ and for companies as well, with the co-working operators that are out there providing safe workspaces, where they can just they can go into the space as long as it's got the certifications like ours do, it's in compliance with Ministry of Labor, following guidelines of international organizations. Then they can have that comfort, and we can provide that comfort, because that's something that's part of our offering now, is providing that comfort and that confidence in returning to the workspace. So I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but I just wanted to kind of get a couple of messages out as we're walking through the workspace acclimation plan. Constance, if you want to just run down a little bit here. Thank you very much for doing this for me. Sanitation, again, so if you look at sanitation, so cleaning space, we have 2-hour rotations in all of our spaces. We have hospital grade disinfectants that we're using throughout all of our spaces. What's important, again, looking at that instilling that confidence, is that not only are we doing it, but we're holding ourselves accountable to it. So if you look at different areas and different amenity spaces throughout our spaces, we've put these signs. So it says exactly when it was cleaned. It tells you when the last rotation of it was. And so as you're walking through the space, you know the last time that space was cleaned. And obviously that's a huge part in making sure that that we keep these spaces safe. So we're sanitizing those areas, again, on 2-hour rotations, very visible for our members. And if there's anything that they have as far as questions on that, they can always talk to our staff that are on site. We have 3 to 4 staff members in each one of our locations. Looking at the individual offices themselves, we also have a cleaning package as well. So when they arrive at the office, they have the sanitizer, they have the wipes and the sprays, and so they're able to do their own cleaning within the space as well. So I think that's important too, because I think it's they want to have confidence in what we're doing, and we need to make sure that we're providing that confidence, while at the same time making sure that we're thinking about what it is that they could do, you know, in the interim. So like if they're sitting at their desk and they're just feeling a little uneasy, they can wipe down that desk if they want to. We've put these desk pads that we have at the front desk when people walk in. So what the desk pad allows them to do is come in, they put the desk pad down, it's paper, and it sits on top of the desk. They can put their computer on it, and at the end of the day, they can roll that up and they can throw that out. So that's an opportunity for them to further, you know, have a surface that hasn't been contacted, and drop it onto to the desk as well. In addition to that, if you had one person using the desk and another person was going to come in and use that desk, it doesn't happen very often because we have private offices, but we may find that many of our members are saying, well, we're going to start sharing desks. We anticipate that could happen in the future, where people are saying, well, we have 6 people on our team, but do we really need a 6-person office? Because are we really going to all be in the office at the same time under this new working regime? And if that's the case, we want to make sure that, you know, they can reuse that desk, have another person come into that desk, and that was one part of that initiative in terms of doing the 4-foot desk mats that we're doing throughout our space. In addition to that, air filtration. So we lease all of our spaces. So we're in contact with all of our landlords to understand, first of all, what their processes are. What is that they're doing in terms of the experience for our members coming into the space? So walking into the lobby of the building, are they getting screened at the front desk? What are the protocols for the elevators? What are the protocols for the stairwells? Like can they use stairwells to go up and down? Are the stairwells directional? Most stairwells are directional, so that you're going up one, you're going down another. So communicating that with our members, because we have to think about not only what is their experience within our space, but they got to get to our space, and we got to think about, well, what is it that experience looks like? And then in addition to that, air filtration, looking at the systems that they have in place. So if you look at the HVAC for a lot of these buildings, most of the buildings that we've been dealing with have the H9 filters, and we've talked with all the landlords. It's been more of in-depth discussions that have happened on our operations side. What we know of the virus today is that it is, or what we believe as the virus today, and as stated by the CDC, is that it's droplet. So it's a possibility of being airborne. It's a low probability. I guess it's kind of like anything's possible. What I would say is that having a HVAC system that filters out any airborne viruses or sicknesses was prudent well before we even got into into the COVID-19 discussions. So it's something that landlords have been looking at for a long time. It's something that, sick building syndrome has been around for years. So it's certainly something that air filtration has always been important, but it's also important now for us to document it and understand exactly what kind of air filtration systems in that building and make sure that it's in compliance with what we need in order to provide safe workspaces. Constance, the next thing we have here, yep, the social distancing. So we talked a little bit about that social distancing, routing traffic flow. So we went through our spaces and we've removed chairs. As I mentioned, you can see that's an example of 1055 West Georgia, which is a Vancouver location of ours, where we have circulation around that space. That's our lounge area there. And so we've put one chair as opposed to having 4 chairs at that location. And so it allows people to utilize the amenity spaces, but utilize it just in a different way. We've taken our meeting rooms as well, and you'll see that a little bit down further. But we've taken our meeting rooms as well and created social distancing there. We've created flex offices. You can see that one where we put our occupancy on each one of the offices. We put our occupancy in the shared workspaces as well. You can see that that's a 2-person table. So everything's very visual throughout the space, and I think it's very important that in order to create those safe workspaces, you open up those lines of communication with your members so that they know that, well, this is how I'm supposed to utilize the space now. And we find that, first of all, doing that communication, that onboarding, I should say re-onboarding for most of our members, but also too, making it very visual. As you can see, as you look through these examples of our spaces, it's very visual. So as you walk through the space, it's very obvious what you should be doing when you're going into these spaces, what your occupancy is at that office, what the occupancy is at that flex space. And that's one of the things we've done as well throughout our spaces is we've created this flex space. We have removed some desks in some areas, but we also think that there's going to be a demand for smaller offices from larger uses where they're saying, I have 10 people, I don't need a 10-person office, we're going to do a 5 or a 6. But they may have a situation where they have more people come in on a periodic basis. So we've created these flex spaces where if you can't all be in the one office, you can use the flex space, number one. Number two, if you have a 4-person office, you have a 4-person company, but you have another person come in, you're not going to be in a situation where you're going to try and put that extra person into an office, which could be unsafe. So you can utilize the flex spaces as well. And then we have the capacity markers. This is just more examples from the visuals. And yeah, so 1 person at each one of those booths. And then this is an example of one of our offices. And then really looking at staff schedules and just talking about rotating the staff schedules. It's important that we make sure we keep the lines of communication open for all of our members to let them know when the high peak times are, so that they can make sure that they're coming to the office at a time when there's not a lot of people coming up to the office at the same time. I mean, Mayor Tory in Ontario said that he was suggesting people don't go back until September. And one of the key reasons was public transit. And I think that one of the solves for that is to not have everybody hopping on public transit at the exact same time. And so I think schedules, and I think that we're doing research right now with our staff, and we're doing with our own use, with our own head office, looking at what is it that we need to do in order to create a hybrid work style, taking into account all of the personal situations for all of our staff, like caretaking and high risk, and the distance that they're going to be traveling, the method of travel. So there's a number of different elements to creating an effective hybrid work style. But one of the things is having your staff come in at a time, like coming into the office in hours that are non-rush hour hours. So not setting up meetings for 8 o'clock in the morning, so that people can come in very early, or people can come in later and then leave later. And so that really can take the load off of the public transit system for those that take public transit, and also too, you can cater it to your specific team. What we found that I thought was really interesting, 85% of our head office staff at IQ take public transit. And then what we did in our survey is we said, well, okay, so you take public transit, how far do you take public transit? How long are you spending on public transit? And we built a profile for each one of our staff with their assistants to understand what will be the best time for them to come to the office, what will be the best days for them to come to the office, what's the best frequency for them to come to the office, and create this hybrid work style where they're able to come into the office with the utmost of safety in mind, but it also allows them to get out of the house, to be in the workspace together, to have that connection with their staff. I can tell you that I can't wait to get back to have that connection with our staff at IQ. And part of it is like we're living it. We are in the spaces that that we service. You know, we're doing all these same things on our own spaces, and then we're also implementing this hybrid work strategy for our head office staff as well, and we'll be looking through that too, and figuring out what the best practice on that is. And then just like we're doing with our workspace acclimation plan, we'll be sharing that information as well. So that will be coming in the next few weeks. We'll be sharing some of that information too. And then the next thing we're talking about is adaptation, looking at our amenities and looking at, we really have to rethink a lot of the ways that we were doing things, because I mean, Trail Mix Snack Bar was one thing that IQ, all of our members just absolutely loved, because they could come in any time of day, healthy snacks, and they could put it into a cup, and they could just, you know, keep the blood sugars up throughout the day. Yet now that becomes a threat. So there's so many things that, you know, you wouldn't have thought of in the past that now are just hyper concerning. And so we have to look at each one of those initiatives. How are we doing our happy hour? How are we offering our coffee and beverage service? How are we doing our snacks? So we've looked at every single one of these, and this workspace acclimation plan just goes through some examples of some of the things that we're doing on those amenities. And again, that's the communication, talking with our members about that. And then the last thing here was we talked about communication, just keeping those lines of communication open. I can say through this whole process, communication has been the most important thing in terms of keeping those lines of communication open with our staff, keeping those lines of communication open with our members, their guests, landlords. What I found is that you really can't over communicate when it comes to these things. There's so much in the way of unknowns, and I think that sometimes when you don't have the answers, you think, well, I'll just wait until I have the answers and then I'll communicate. And I think that it's more important to, as you learn, even not having the answers, but being present is important. And so in terms of even looking at our workspace acclimation plan, you know, we've rolled that out in Vancouver right now. We're taking feedback from our members every single day. Like, how are you liking this experience? How are you feeling? What can we do more, right? The people that haven't come on site yet, you know, we'll be reaching out to them over the next few weeks, asking them, you know, what is it that we can do? We got to keep those lines of communication open to understand what it takes. And some people won't feel comfortable. There'll be different levels of comfort in terms of returning back to the office. And some people will just say, look, I don't want to return to the office until there's a vaccine. Other people have a very different feel on that. But from our perspective, if there's anything that we can do that is within our control, we want to make sure that we know about it. We want to make sure that we're putting those initiatives into place. And that's a lot of how this works plan came together. We were looking at working with Get Ready on what do we need to do? What are the best practices? What are those things? And then we look at, okay, well, what is the experience? And we talk to our members and we get feedback in that. And then we take that back to Get Ready and say, well, can we do this? Can we do this? Like, what can we augment this offering in this way, right? Like, as an example, I saw a video with Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and he walked into one of the plants and someone took a temperature guide. It's one of the ones that you see like on Bob the Builder sort of thing, and they put it at his forehead and took his temperature. And I think that accomplishes what it needs to accomplish, which is it took his temperature to see if he was running a fever. But when we think about, well, what kind of experience do we want our members to have at IQ? Like, having a laser pointed at your forehead every morning is not a great experience. So like, those are the kind of things where we have to really think about, okay, there's humans here, right? And what is it that's going to make them feel safe? What is it that's going to make them feel comfortable? And what is it going to make them that makes them feel efficient? So it's just been fantastic that we've had Get Ready to help us with this throughout this process, because we've been able to take everything that they've said, we've been able to talk to our members about it, we've been able to talk to our staff about it, we've been able to go back to them, we've been able to refine, and then get to where we are today. And that's not to say that we're done, because we're going to continue to refine it. And especially now rolling out in Vancouver, we have, you know, live examples. But I would say that one of the things is that we're sharing this workspace acclimation plan because we think it's important that we communicate with everyone. We let people know what we're doing. I think it's important for anyone who's looking at creating safe workspaces to look at what we're doing, because we believe that this is best practices. So I think this is helpful. But I can't stress enough that it it's very customized to what your needs are as an organization, if you're an organization, to your building if you're a landlord, to your space if you're a service provider, and to, I mean, if you're a tenant, to your space as well. And you really have to look at each one of those things. You have to look at the customer that you're serving, and for most companies, the customer that they're serving is their employees, their staff. Like, what do they need to create a safe workspace for them? What do they need to do? So I think from that perspective, if you really want to create the level of safety that we have, you need to make that investment. You need to make the investment in time. You need to make the investment in the professionals, the experts, to really go through and look at each one of the locations on a location by location basis and decide, what is it that needs to be done, right? And then they assist as well with the communication plan too, in terms of like what's important. But we had to augment that as well, because I mean, our members aren't our staff, so we can't, like, it's different in the sense that it's not, we can't dictate. We're not an employer. We can't say we require you to X, Y, and Z. What we can do is say that these are our policies within our space, and obviously we can enforce those. But we need to create a product, being the service workspace, that is attractive, so that people want to come back to the office, right? And that is extremely important from our perspective. So we're selling the space over and over and over again. We're selling the service, the offering over and over and over again. So, I mean, safety is a huge component of it. Communication is a huge component of it. But our communication with our members will be very different than what the communication might be with your members if you're a technology company, or what your communication might be with your tenants if you're a landlord, or any of the relationships that I talked about earlier. So, I guess what I'm saying, just very high level, is that if you're interested in implementing one of these plans, first of all, I mean, use us as a resource. I am more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has. If there's like some best practices, I know that this is daunting, so if we can be of assistance, we're here. Feel free to reach out to us. But in addition to that, we have Get Ready Global, which we've used as well, and I can also make a recommendation to them if that's of interest to you. But if you're in the early stages of this process, or you're in the later stages and you have some questions and you're running through some roadblocks in terms of like really getting it to the ground and implementation, we may be able to help. And we think it's important that we create these safe workspaces, that we assist in these workspaces, and we want to be a part of the solution. So if there's anything we can do to help that, if answering questions or spending a little bit of time with those who are wanting to provide safe work environments for their staff, for their members, for their tenants, we're happy to help. Constance, do we have any questions, or Rodney, do we have any questions?
Thank you for that phenomenal explanation of the whole process that you went through and your plan. It's very clear that IQ has gone through a very thoughtful and systematic approach to all of this and taken it very seriously. And we all appreciate you sharing all of this with us. There are some questions from the audience. We have a couple minutes left, so we'll take those. Sure. The first question for you, Kane, is do you have any preliminary insight into the forecast increase in occupancy costs due to the additional precautions and facility procedures implemented?
Yeah, so are we talking we're talking about the increased occupancy cost from the perspective of those providing workspaces? So if I was an employer, or if I was a workspace operator, is that what we're asking, like what the cost would be?
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, you have to break that down to a number of things. First of all, there's a significant investment that to be made. It depends on your situation, is what is the overarching thing. But from our perspective, we had to invest in additional furniture. We had to invest in plexiglass, which is extremely hard to get. We had to invest in personal protective equipment and all the sanitation, cleaning and so forth. So all those were fairly expensive. I would say, though, the bigger expense is the time. It's just what it takes to really kind of understand it and then implement it and then oversee it and continue to implement it over a period of time. Because that's a very expensive resource, because it takes someone within the organization with a heightened level of capability and interest and passion about creating these safe workspaces to spend that time on it. And for many companies, that person is usually focused on their core business, not doing this.
Right. Yes. A lot of people in the real estate community think in terms of, price per square foot or cost per square foot. Can you give us a sense of, the time aspect aside, but the hard costs that you've had to incur? Do you have a sense of even a range on a per square foot basis for yourself?
I'm just trying to think of what we would be in the range on that. That would be, you know what? I can get back to you on that. I can tell you what that would be because I could give you something off the top of my head, but it might be wrong. I'd rather follow up with you, and I'd be happy to answer that question. More than happy to answer that question because we could look at what our raw costs are of all the different things that we've implemented with shipping, with everything else that we put in place, and that's just the raw cost of those things. I'm happy to share that figure with you, and we can provide that on per square foot.
Excellent, great. Our next question, I think the last one we have time for, is with all the new signage, communications, screen-based communications, how is IQ ensuring that people of all abilities in offices can read and follow the wayfinding, particularly the wayfinding in particular? And I think the question is, in terms of accessibility aspects for people.
Right, so we've looked at accessibility. That's certainly something that we have to think about for all of our spaces, turning radiuses and so on and so forth. With that, we have staff on site every single day that can assist with anyone who is moving in and about the space. So we haven't, I know that we have, that is something that's been thought of in terms of like how we're doing it. We don't have a situation as of right now where we're implementing it, but we are prepared.
Wonderful.
And training is a big thing, and I should have spoke a little bit about that as well in terms of those man hours or the hours that it takes to train someone. So we had to train all of our staff, and so that was one of the things as well, because it's communication with our members, but then also like how do you really kind of, as they start to work in the space, how do they interact with the space? So accessibility is absolutely important to make sure that it's inclusive and everyone can utilize the space in a safe way.